We're going to talk about one of my heroes, one of my earliest heroes. You see, I'm a trombone player. And when you play the trombone, there is no way to become a jazz trombone player and not study J.J. Johnson. There is no way, period. He is the man of all time. Won more downbeat solo trombone awards than anybody. No one's even close. It's not a second place. It's just JJ, period. Now, he was born in Naptown, that is Indianapolis, Indiana, 1924, as James Lewis Johnson. His friends just called him JJ. At an early age, he started playing the piano, somewhere around 8 or 9. But around 14, he picked up his first trombone and fell in love. Now, after playing that piano for a while and having the fluency of a pianist, he just could not figure out why trombone players couldn't play that as well. So he developed a slide technique and a knowledge of alternate positions and whatnot, so that he could play lines as smooth and quick as any instrument. So in his hands, the trombone was not a cumbersome instrument. It was very, very flighty. Matter of fact, one of my favorite albums is Jazz at the Opera House with he and Stan Getz. And there's some places where Stan Getz is having to work overtime on that tenor sax just to keep up with JJ with that slide trombone. Oh, but I digress. You see, I love JJ like that. JJ played with a whole lot of people. He met Fats Navarro somewhere early in his career. And Fats said, man, well, you can play the horn. You could probably play solo just like Prez, you know. You can get around like a saxophone player. And so JJ started playing lines and licks on the trombone that were only found among saxophone players. And all the other trombone players were like, oh. Matter of fact, at the advent of bebop, JJ was the first and only bebop trombone player of his generation. That's right, it was JJ standing there with Bird, standing there with Sonny Rollins, standing there with Diz. Matter of fact, Diz was one of the cats who told him, oh yeah, man, I always knew the trombone could play this music, and now you are proving it. JJ was that kind of cat. Bad to the bone. Now, he played all over the world. Did concerts for the military, Japan, Korea, those kind of things. At one point, you know, he decided that the music thing had gotten a little uneasy for him, so he took a job as a printing inspector. That's a day job to make sure he could eat well and live well. And even that, he was doing recordings with Miles Davis that even produced the milestone of all recordings, a tune called Walking. Yeah, that trombone player is JJ. And this is when he is kind of a part-time musician. He's making these unbelievable recordings. Nominated for several Grammys and whatnot. And when things slowed up for straight ahead jazz in the late 60s and 70s with the advent of the rock and roll and the fusion and all that, JJ wasn't having any of that. He says, you know what, I've got skills. He always was a great composer. He had tunes on Miles' albums way back in the 40s. So he always was a great writer. So what did he do? He moved to Hollywood. And he started writing for cinema and for television. Some of the things you might know is like Sea of Love, remember that one? Well, that music is the music of J.J. Johnson. All black folk remember Shaft. Oh yeah, that music, oh, that's J.J. Johnson too. And many others. JJ was a complete musician. And as a result of writing sound scores, He wrote for symphonic orchestras. He was commissioned to write for symphonic orchestras. They called it third stream music, combining jazz with classics. He even wrote for symphonic bands, wind orchestras, commissions. People demanding that you write this for us because he had that impeccable technique as a composer. While touring in the 80s, he discovered that his first wife had a stroke that left her bedridden. What does JJ do? He puts his career on hold. He moves back home for 3.5 years. He took care of his wife right up until her death. And he did not resume his career until after she passed away, I think in the late 80s, maybe 90s somewhere, in that area. And he went right back to performing, remarried, and kept going with his playing career because he was always a musician of the highest level, not just in his technique and his creativity, but in his heart. I always loved JJ's playing, and when he restarted his career in the early 90s, I had an opportunity to meet him in a workshop he was doing at the University of South Florida on a Saturday morning. And there were very few people there. I was so disappointed. This great giant of a musician, and the room was not even half full. But I had a chance to meet him, and his spirit and his kindness and that smile and those soft eyes, it said everything that I always understood about him through his music. JJ did himself get sick with prostate cancer, and that is a disease that did take him away from us. But he changed the concept of the trombone. And when the music industry walked away from straight ahead jazz, he moved to California and started writing for movies and television. And when things got reinvigorated after the fad was pretty much over, he came back and started touring and playing his music again. When his career was interrupted by his wife's illness, he came home to take care of his family. And then he resumed his career again. Lifelong musician, son of Naptown in Annapolis, Indiana, and my very first jazz hero. Did I mention J&K? He actually had a group with J.J. Johnson and Kay Winden, 2 trombone players leading a jazz combo? Are you kidding me? Who ever heard of such a thing? Yeah, and it was very successful too. Yes, it was. And later in life, he did a similar album with another trombone player who I actually met and played with in my younger days, and that is the great Al Gray, who was Basie's trombone player. There was a kindred spirit there between Al Gray and JJ, because back in the 40s, JJ himself had been a member of the Count Basie Orchestra. So we're talking about a giant of a man, a giant on the slide trombone, and a giant of a musician, both as a player and as a composer arranger. Thank you, J.J. Johnson, for inspiring tens of thousands of trombone players to say, you know what, we can do that too. So every trombone player who's come after him, whether it's Pugh or Wycliffe Gordon or Frank Rosalino or whoever you think you like, Conrad and all those guys, They all come from JJ, baby. Thank you, Mr. JJ Johnson, the coolest cat I know. And thank you for listening.